And do you want to at least share your screen so we can test that?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get the audio. I don't know what the audio currently is.
You see my screen okay?
Yes, we see your screen. We still have the audio issue. It doesn't want to play through the room speakers. I hate technology. Okay, try talking again.
Hello?
Ah, yes. All right.
Hey,
You're playing
okay.
through the big speakers now.
All right.
Excellent. All right, I'll give people just a few more minutes to show up. All right. I think we're actually working. All right, thank you all
Okay,
for
cool.
coming. And so please help yourselves to cookies. I'm going to grab some cups. Sorry, all over the place today. I lost my ID. Oh, Lord. Anybody see my ID? I've lost my head today, apparently. I have cups. And then you get signed in so I can give you credit. I'll make 2 columns. And 2 classes. And help yourself to food. And so Carly will give everyone just a few minutes, and we'll start if that's okay. Right, like 105, 106.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Sorry? Oh, I did. Did I find my sanity? Probably not. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And so first of all, thanks so much, Carly, for agreeing to come and speak. So it's now our 2nd year doing this, and ironically, it's becoming this tradition where I somehow happen to have a student who has a sibling that is in a graduate program and doing cool stuff in chemistry. So I thought, hey, this is an awesome opportunity to bring Carly in, and she can tell us all about her research, how she even got to grad school, what do you do? And then, of course, y'all can ask her plenty of questions at the end. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Carly. And again, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, my name is Carly Weiss. I'm a graduate student in chemistry, pursuing PhD here at Oregon State University, and I'll just be sharing a bit about how I've gotten where I am today, kind of the unusual path that I've taken to get here, and what I'm doing now. There we go. So to begin, a little bit about my background and journey here. I'm definitely a non-traditional student, so I'm 32. I graduated in 2008 from Phoenix High School, so I'm from Southern Oregon, grew up down there. I was not exactly a stellar student in high school. C's, B's, bad life choices at the time. And so I didn't really have any goals of going to college or university or anything once I was done with high school. So I went straight into the restaurant industry. I worked as a restaurant manager until 2013. And then met my now husband and moved with him to Iowa and worked as everyone's favorite profession as a debt collector. And while I was in Iowa, I had my daughter. She was born in 2015. And during that same year, my husband suffered a work-related injury. And so he was actually unable to work then. And we weren't really sure what his prospects were going to be at that point. And so we decided to move back to Oregon, where we had support of my family to help us at that point. And for my own financial security and the financial security of our family, decided I should go to school and find something that's a little bit more stable. So I decided to start at Road Community College fall of 2016. So I'll give you a little bit of history of my time while I was at RCC. So from 2016 to 2018, I was just going to school at RCC. And my original plan was to become an IBCLC. So it's an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. And that just required about 1 year of coursework. There was no chemistry involved at all, which I thought at that time was a big perk of going that route. I hated chemistry in high school. I actually dropped chemistry after about a month of doing it because I was like about to fail the class if I kept with it. And so I always thought, chemistry is not my subject. But I was finding that I was really, really enjoying the nutrition courses that I was taking. Now, in hindsight, looking back, I probably was because there was a lot of chemistry involved, but I didn't realize that that was what was happening at the time. And so looking more into the certification that I was going in, I was going to make okay money, but it wasn't the best job prospect. And so I thought, since I'm really enjoying nutrition, I should just go for a degree in nutrition. So I decided to major in nutrition with the goal of becoming a registered dietitian. That profession coincided well with the lactation consultant role that I was interested in taking on. So I thought that would be a good pairing and provide me with more financial stability. This was going to require doing a 4-year degree and at least doing either a 1-year internship or completing a 2 years master program. And the internship and master's program for registered dietitians are very, very competitive. So at this point, I was kind of worried if I was going to have the qualifications to be able to get into one of these programs, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. The scarier prospect to me, though, was that it was going to require taking general chemistry and organic chemistry. I was dreading that, but I thought I'm just going to push myself and do this. Oregon State University is actually the only school in Oregon that has an accredited dietetics program. So that was where I had my my sights set on was that I would eventually be transferring to Oregon State University. And so I graduated from RCC in summer of 2018 with an Associates of Arts Oregon transfer degree, and went ahead and applied for the OSU RCC degree partnership program at Oregon State. After graduating with my associates, I still hadn't taken any chemistry courses at that time. I was still procrastinating as much as possible. So I figured I could stay down here where I have my family around to help support and help me, and get my chemistry out of the way before going up to OSU and finishing my degree. So that brings me to the 2018-2019 school year, when I was dual enrolled between the two. So I was taking online classes at OSU in nutrition, and then my in-person chemistry courses at RCC. And during this time, I was actually working at RCC. So I worked in student government, associated student government, as the director of health and wellness. And I was trying to find ways to, beef up my resume before going into either an internship or master's program. And so during this time, I spearheaded a project doing research on campus to see what sort of levels of food insecurity there were among the student body. So we administered a survey, collected a bunch of data, and then myself and my collaborator, we prepared a grant proposal to the RCC Foundation, and were approved for funding to open up the first food pantry on campus. So if you've heard of Aussie's Cupboard, that was like my first, well, I guess my second child. So that was a really fun project to be a part of, and I guess kind of my first little taste of like doing a little bit of research. And then additionally, I was working in the Academic Success Center as a faculty tutor, and I was primarily tutoring biology, math, nutrition, but I was taking chemistry at the same time, and there were quite a few students who were in my class that would come in, and there wasn't really anybody there at the time who was very knowledgeable in chemistry, so I would do my best to help them. And I found I was having a really fun time explaining chemistry to them, and it was helping me understand the material a lot better as well. That leads me to spring term taking chemistry, so 2019. And this was kind of a pivotal term, I guess, for me. So it was Easter, and we were, as one often does, dyeing Easter eggs. And my husband was preparing all of the Easter egg dyes. And he tends to not always read directions all the way through. So he prepared the first dyes fine, mixed them in vinegar as the directions said, and then got to the pink, didn't read that it said to put that one in water, and he put it in vinegar, and it did not dissolve. And my daughter was crying. Pink was her favorite color, and she wanted a pretty pink Easter egg. So Easter was about to be ruined. And then I had an epiphany, because I had been learning about solubility in chemistry class, and I realized, I thought at least I realized what the issue was. So I hypothesized that the vinegar was too acidic to cause the pink to dissolve into the solution. So I figured if I neutralized the acid, maybe I could get this to dissolve. So I added a base, I added some baking soda, and lo and behold, it dissolved. We got pretty pink eggs. My daughter was happy again. And then, of course, my sister had to dye this Easter egg saying Carly is a nerd. So she's lovely. Anyways, that was a kind of moment for me when I realized, hey, this stuff has real world applications. And I think the level of excitement that I got out of that moment kind of made me realize, hey, chemistry is actually something that like I can do and I could have fun with. So that leads me to 2019. I finished taking general chemistry. There was no longer anything that I could take at RCC. I had to get up to OSU to keep working on my degree. So 2019 to 2020 was supposed to be my senior year, and I was taking organic chemistry. And I know this is about me becoming an inorganic chemist, but for whatever reason at the time, I actually was really enjoying organic chemistry. And I spoke with my professor and told him, feel like I'm enjoying chemistry more than I'm enjoying nutrition, and I'm worried that I'm making the wrong choice here. So he connected me with an advisor on campus. Her focus is in chemical education. And after meeting with her and telling her about myself and how I love teaching and tutoring chemistry and everything, we decided that this sounded like it was a good fit for me. So I changed my major from nutrition to chemistry fall term of my senior year, with a focus in chemical education. And my plan was to teach high school chemistry. So I was working as a teaching assistant, teaching labs, helping in lectures, and really enjoying myself there. But I was kind of getting nervous that maybe high school level wasn't what I was wanting to go for. Was thinking maybe I want to stay more within the university and academia. So I decided to see what research was like. And I joined Dr. Kyriakos Styliano's research group in the Materials Discovery Lab and worked with him doing some undergraduate research, which I'll talk about more here in some upcoming slides. But this got me to thinking more, maybe PhD is the route that I do want to go. So I applied for 2 different grad school programs at OSU. Applied for the Master's in Science Education as my contingency plan. That was my original plan. And then I also went ahead and threw in an application for a PhD in chemistry. And spoiler alert, I was accepted in both, and I decided to go ahead for the PhD in chemistry. So I graduated this past spring summa cum laude with a research fellow distinction for my research in Dr. Kyriakos Styliano's research group. And now I'm here as a PhD student. So before I get too far into talking about what I'm doing now as a PhD student and my research, I want to share a little bit with you about some of the research I did as an undergrad. So my research as an undergrad was on metal organic frameworks, or MOFs. And what we did, my project kind of encompassed both my interest in teaching and chemistry together. And so I developed a new lab using metal organic frameworks for general chemistry students. So here's my group of students who participated in the lab. So they learned about metal organic frameworks, how to make them, how to characterize them, how to use them in applications, and then they presented all of their work in a poster presentation. So you can see some of their posters here in this photo. And this project opened some doors for some really exciting opportunities for me. So I got to travel to Purdue University with a couple of my collaborators on the project and present our work at the biennial conference in chemical education. And this has also led to what will soon hopefully be my first publication that I'm first author on. So we're submitting our paper to the Journal of Chemical Education. So hopefully that will be available soon. So now as a first year PhD student, what is my life like? So in June of 2022, I began working with Dr. May Nyman. And probably the biggest change between being an undergrad and a PhD student is that I get paid to get a PhD. So my tuition is fully covered. I receive a monthly salary with benefits, working as either graduate teaching assistant or graduate research assistant. So currently I'm working as a graduate teaching assistant, teaching honors general chemistry labs and recitations twice a week. When I'm not teaching, I'm either grading, or I'm in class, or I'm working on homework, or I'm in the lab working on my research. So the research that we do in the lab, it focuses in inorganic chemistry. We investigate metal oxide clusters, do actinide chemistry, discover new periodic trends, and then our most recent project is on carbon capture. And so the project that I'm working on is part of the carbon capture project. So looking at my current research, what I'm doing, I'm using reactive peroxide species for direct air capture of carbon dioxide. And specifically, I am making new reactive oxygen species. So these are ones that haven't been published. There's not data on them or anything. My structures that I'm making are tetraperoxotitanates. So they're titanium You can see the structure here. So there's titanium with these oxides attached to it, and then it's charge balanced with 4 alkali metals. So the alkalis that I have used in my materials are lithium, sodium, and potassium so far. And then I perform carbon capture experiments on these and do a lot of characterizing of these materials, especially since this is a brand new materials. There's no data in the literature to look up on these to know, what the structure is supposed to look like, how it behaves or anything. So a lot of my time is spent on characterizing. So one of the main ways that I do this after I make a material, one of these new materials, is I use single crystal X-ray diffraction. So this is a picture of our instrument that we have here on campus. And basically what I do is I isolate one single crystal out of my sample. And this part is probably the most tedious because you have to look for a really good single crystal that's not like overlaid with others. And my materials in particular are very reactive, so I have to work quickly as they tend to decompose as I'm trying to find a sample. And these are very small. I'm working under a microscope, basically using like a microscopic spoon to scoop up this crystal. So then that gets placed into the instrument here, and we shine X-rays through it. And when this happens, the X-rays hit the electrons within the structure and they diffract and hit the detector. And then the computer takes that information, does some math, and then it gives us information about the unit cell of the crystal structure. So the unit cell is just the simplest building block that makes up the crystal. It repeats itself to form the big structure that we can actually see. So this is just kind of a basic motif of what a unit cell looks like, or this is 4 unit cells in my structure. There's multiple atoms in there. It's a lot more complicated than this, but it helps us just confirm that what I made is what I'm showing you today. So the structure that I showed you earlier, we determined from doing the single crystal X-ray diffraction. For my carbon capture experiments, I'll kind of do a walkthrough with you on what that looks like. So primarily, my carbon capture experiments have all been with the sodium tetraperoxotitanate. It's the first one that I made, and the yield on it is very high, so I have a lot of it to work with. So this is what the material looks like when it's fresh, when I synthesize it. And then one thing we do is we place this sample into a chamber filled with dry ice. So dry ice is solid carbon dioxide, and at room temperature, it goes from being a solid to a gas. So basically the sample ends up sitting in a chamber of like a CO2 cloud. So after 1 day in the chamber of CO2, we notice that it changes from a white crystalline sample to this bright yellow. After another day in the chamber, then it ends up being this pale yellow. And then we also put it on the benchtop just to see if we get similar reaction with the CO2 in the atmosphere. And it's much slower, but after 30 days, we also see that pale yellow color in the end. So something's definitely happening. That color change indicates something about our structure is changing. To learn a little bit more about what's changing in the structure, we have a few different techniques that we can use. So one of them is infrared spectroscopy. This is a picture of the instrument that I use to do this. This helps us see how the atoms are bonded together. So there's the bending and stretching of these bonds that occur between atoms. They have characteristic frequencies depending on what's bonded to what. So what this kind of looks like, here's an example of some of my sample. So the black line on top was the fresh sample, the white, and then after 1 day over dry ice, you get the orange here. And so this region in particular is of interest to us. We see there's some new peaks. The intensity of the peaks are getting a lot stronger, and so something's changing within the structure. And in particular, this is a region where we would see carbon-oxygen bonds from CO2. And so it makes sense that we would see that there. So that's a good confirmation. Another thing we can do is use scanning electron microscopy, SEM, and energy dispersive X-ray analysis, EDX. So SEM allows us to see very, very strong magnification. So we're looking at our materials on the scale of micrometers. And then EDX is incorporated within the SEM. So it allows us to do elemental analysis on the region that we're magnifying. So here's some images that I took from SEM and our EDX results on the sodium tetraperoxidate structure. So the first images here are the same crystal zoomed out and zoomed in. And the EDX shows us that the ratio is 4:1 sodium to titanium, which is exactly what we got for our formula from the single crystal data. So that further confirms that. And then notice that there were some other crystals that looked a little bit different in appearance. And so we zoomed in on that region and saw that there's a slightly different ratio, 3:1 sodium to titanium ratio. So we do have some other phase in smaller quantities present within our sample as well. Looking at the SEM for my sample after it had been placed over dry ice for a day, you see that it looks totally different. So the structure is obviously changing. It's not the nice pure crystal that we had before. It's losing some of its crystallinity. And the EDX is also showing that the ratios now of these different regions are much different than they were before. And then same with the 30 days on the bench, we see a lot of loss in the crystallinity and change in ratio. So again, something's happening. You know, it's research, it's a process of figuring out what exactly is happening, but we know something's going on. And so to look more at the loss of crystallinity, one thing we do is use powder X-ray diffraction. So the graph here, the top, there's really nice sharp peaks that we get when we collect this data. And these clean sharp peaks are indicative that this is a really crystalline sample that we're looking at. So this is the fresh sample. And then we see going down that the sample is getting a little bit noisier. It's looking a little bit more chaotic. The peaks aren't so nice and sharp. And so we're seeing some loss in the crystallinity. That's what that's telling us. And then one interesting thing that we discovered here is the sample that had been on the bench compared to the simulated PXRD for sodium carbonate have a lot of similarities in their peak positions. And so that's telling us that probably we have some sodium carbonate that's formed within our structure. So another good indication of how the CO2 is combining in the material. Another thing I use is thermogravitational analysis and mass spectrometry, so TGA mass spec. And this right here is the TGA. You place your sample in, it weighs your sample at the beginning and then heats your sample up to very high degrees, so like 800 or 900 degrees Celsius. And as it does that, your sample will decompose and release gases off the sample and record the weight loss. So you have your initial and final weight of sample. And so you know how much has been lost to gas. And then the mass spec will analyze all the gases that have been released and separate them and tell you which different gases were released from your sample. So the data from that looks something like this. The first graph here is the TGA curve, so that's showing the weight loss. So we started with our fresh sample, and then at the end, there was loss of CO2, water, and oxygen. So the first two graphs, top and bottom, are the same result from the fresh sample. The bottom one's just zoomed in on the region down here below the water. So we can see that the CO2 there's no peaks of CO2 at all, which tells us that the fresh sample did not have CO2 in the structure. When we run the same thing with the 1 day dry ice sample, we now see that there are peaks for CO2 in addition to oxygen. So definitely CO2 in some way has combined into our material. So that's where I'm at with my research now. Still have some more work to do on it. So for future work, I want to continue working on synthesizing my material with the remaining alkali metals. So cesium, maybe rubidium, it's expensive though. And then continue doing carbon captured studies with the rest of the alkali analogs that I've made. Perform elemental analysis that will give us a more accurate determination of how much carbon's actually being taken up into the material. And then do some collaborations with some computational chemists to determine more the reaction mechanism, how the material is actually taking up the carbon and where in the material it's happening. And then also working on trying to synthesize hafnium and zirconium tetraperoxymetalates. So hafnium and zirconium are below titanium on the periodic table. So seeing if there's some sort of trend with changing the metals going down the table. With that, I'll just kind of conclude by offering some words of advice to any future transfer students out there, or just students in general, whatever your career goals are. But transfer students, especially if you're going off to a university, biggest advice to you is to get to know your professors. It can be hard and it's kind of overwhelming at first, going from being at a community college where you have 40, maybe 50 max people in the classroom with you, to classes at the university where maybe there's 3, 4, upwards of 500 people in class with you. And so it feels a little bit impersonal sometimes. So I definitely recommend going to office hours, talking with your professors, getting to learn about their research. If you make an effort to come see them, they will remember you. And that's one of the best things you can do if you need letters of recommendation in the future or anything. So highly, highly recommend doing that. Other thing is to take chances. I took a chance and applied for grad school. I wasn't really sure how likely that was going to be for me to get in to a PhD program, but I went for it. Why not? And so here I am. So look for opportunities too. Even if you think you're not qualified, it won't hurt to try, and you might discover something that you didn't realize that you were interested in. Plan your time efficiently, but also leave time for yourself. This is advice to me still currently, because I still struggle with this, but it can be especially hard when you're at a university for the first time. And then just follow what excites you. So don't be afraid to change your plans if you discover that something doesn't feel right for you, or if you discover you're really, really enjoying something, like lead into it. So with that, I just want to give some acknowledgements to a lot of the people who helped get me here, get me to where I am today. So Kevin Culhane, he was my general chemistry instructor at RCC. He's retired now, but I believe still working in the tutoring center. So some of you may have met him there. He was one of the first people to really inspire me and get me excited about chemistry. Margie Hack, she was my undergraduate advisor and always really supportive of me, and especially when I came to her and said, I want to go for a PhD, she gave me a lot of advice on the best way to make that happen. Dr. Kyriakos Stylianou for his mentoring me during undergrad with my research with him. Of course, Dr. May Nyman, who's my current advisor and PI for my research projects. And of course, my group, my wonderful group who they're here watching me today, supporting me and helping me whenever I need it. And then special thanks to Dr. Marissa Shepard for inviting me here today, and for all of you for listening. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you again for your time listening.
All right, thank you. Please give her a big hand. Oh, forgot to unmute, sorry. So yeah, thank you so much. First, I have a question, if you don't mind. So are you trying to get grow a crystal then of the yellow powder stuff? I was just curious.
So the yellow powder stuff is as the crystal starts to decompose. So it's losing crystallinity when it becomes the yellow powder.
Yeah, I was just curious if you try to like maybe redissolve the yellow powder and then get it to like crystallize out as something new. I'm not sure if that would work.
I haven't tried that exactly. We're trying to see what we can dissolve it in to do kind of more studies of it in solution, but haven't looked at recrystallizing it. They're not super soluble in very many things, so.
That was going to be my next question. So what is it soluble in?
Still trying to figure that out.
Water, DMSO.
It's not soluble in water. With my structures, we haven't done too many solubility tests, so I don't know beyond water at this point. But some others in my group are working on the vanidates instead of titanium, and they've struggled finding something that theirs dissolves in as well. So.
Yeah, that makes sense why you use a lot of the powder and other scanning electron microscope techniques. That's awesome. All right, audience question, and you might have to come up. I don't know. At least just so the camera microphone can pick it up.
Well, with more research and development, what could be some real-world uses for the carbon capture technology you're working on?
That's a good question. So we don't focus too much on the application side of it beyond just, is this material good for carbon capture? Then the material scientists can kind of figure out how exactly to apply that. But because it can capture hopefully CO2 from the atmosphere, in some sort of application where like remediation, where you're removing CO2 levels out of the atmosphere, since CO2, as we know, has been drastically increasing since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Some sort of application like that where it can help bring CO2 levels down.
Other audience? Yeah.
How long does the whole process take typically of using all the different machines and stuff?
It depends on the instrument, and it depends on the structure that you're analyzing. Single crystal, it depends on how long it takes you to find a good crystal. Sometimes you'll mount a crystal and you'll go to, fire up the machine and then you get no diffraction, or it's bad diffraction, or your spots aren't very clear. And so then you have to try again and load another new crystal. And so that can take a few hours. And then once you actually get a good crystal loaded, then the actual time of running the instrument can be a few hours. It just depends on the parameters that you set the instrument to run. Other things like IR is really, really quick. You just place your sample on there and then it takes like 2 minutes to run it. Let's see what else. Doing like the SEM, that can take a while as you kind of scan across your material and find different regions that look interesting and gather photos and run the EDX on it. So that can take a couple hours to do. The actual time of like making my materials, it varies. So the lithium, we are seeing kind of a periodic trend. The lithium forms fastest. Takes like less than an hour to synthesize, to make the solution. And then by the next day, the crystals precipitate out of the solution. Sodium's kind of in the middle. It takes like 2 hours to get the solution prepared and then a day or two to crystallize. And then the potassium takes the longest. It takes about 4 hours to prepare the solution, and then about 5 days before I get crystals out of the solution. And then cesium has not happened yet. I've made the solutions and then I haven't been able to get crystals out of them yet. So we'll see what happens. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Other audience questions? Also, that was super awesome that you started Ozzy's Covered.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Ozzy's Covered still alive and well, so thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's good to hear.
And then, so I have another question. So do you yourself mount the crystals then, it sounds like?
I do, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. I never got to do that in grad school. Just the crystallographer did it. So then do you like solve your own structures, or does someone help you, or I was curious.
I'm still kind of learning on solving it myself. So we do have a crystallographer. He's helped me with one of the structures, and then we have two postdocs in our group that have helped me with some other structures as well.
That's pretty awesome. That at least you get to learn how to solve it. That's something I
Yeah,
never
it's fun.
did.
No, I really enjoy doing some single crystal. It's tedious and can be a pain in the butt, but it's fun.
Any other questions for our speaker? All right, well, I think that's everything. Again,
Okay.
I really appreciate it. That was an awesome talk, and I mean, that was really inspirational too. It's never too late to go back to grad school and
That's
change your career.
right. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, hopefully everybody's had a good term and enjoys the break.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. Again, I really appreciate it. Awesome pictures so you can see the equipment too. That's always awesome to see. Since you often hear all these equipment things, IR, SCM, but until you're actually looking at the machine, it's just words. So thank you
Yeah.
again.
Yeah,
All right.
no problem.
Let's give
All
another
right. Thank you,
hand.
everybody.
Thanks again for your time. And we really
All right.
appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Sweet. Well, thank you guys. I will stop this stream. Hopefully